It's sweet that she still putters around with this quaint little hobby." The words, sharp as a freshly honed chisel, cut right through the warm buzz of the party. My daughter-in-law Ashley didn't even bother to lower her voice. She was speaking to my son Kevin, but her voice was loud enough for half the workshop to hear. She gestured around at the state-of-the-art machinery, at the legacy my late husband Frank and I had built from the dirt floor of our garage, and dismissed all of it with a flick of her wrist. A hobby. I saw my son, my own boy, just stand there and offer his wife a weak, tight-lipped smile. He didn't defend me. He didn't defend his father's memory. In that moment, all the years of hard work, the splinters, the sleepless nights spent sketching designs on napkins at the kitchen table, all of it felt like it had been reduced to a dusty keepsake on a shelf, a quaint little thing for an old woman to pass the time. She saw a hobby. What she didn't see was the $50 million national company she had just insulted. She didn't see the woman who signed the checks that paid for the designer clothes on her back. And she certainly didn't see the storm she had just unleashed. To understand how we reached that breaking point, you need to understand how that night began. It didn't start with an insult. It started with a celebration, with the whole workshop smelling of grilled hot dogs, sawdust, and the cheap American lager the guys loved. It was a party for Dave Jensen, our first ever hire, who was finally hanging up his tool belt after 40 years. 40 years. The number felt immense, a monument to a kind of loyalty that feels like it's from another era. The whole crew was there, guys in worn-in Carhartt jackets and faded flannel shirts, their wives trading recipes over by the dessert table, which was loaded down with potluck offerings of Jell-O salad and brownies. Country music was playing softly from a portable speaker, and the big bay doors of the finishing shop were rolled open to the cool autumn air. This was my family, not the one of blood, but the one of sweat and splinters and shared pride in a job well done. This was the world Frank and I had built. My late husband would have loved this. He would have been right in the middle of it all, a beer in one hand, telling some story that would make everyone roar with laughter. The thought of him was a dull, constant ache right below my ribs. I was standing off to the side, watching Dave get ribbed by the younger guys, when my general manager Michael tapped me on the shoulder. "Showtime, Evelyn." I took a deep breath and made my way to the small, makeshift stage we'd set up. 100 pairs of warm, familiar eyes turned to me. I'm not a public speaker. Frank was the charmer, the storyteller. I was the one who made sure the books balanced and the payroll went out on time, but this was my duty, my honor. "I'm not going to give a long speech," I started, my voice a little shaky, "because Dave here knows that after 40 years, if I haven't told him how much he means to this company, a speech isn't going to fix it." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. But I will say this, when my husband Frank and I started this business, we had nothing, and I mean nothing. We had a set of his grandfather's tools, a half-finished business plan I'd written on the back of a placemat at a diner, and a dream that felt so big it was terrifying. My eyes drifted to a display case we had in the main office, where we kept Frank's first framing hammer. The handle, made of hickory, was worn smooth and dark, molded perfectly to the shape of his hand. It was our central relic, the symbol of everything we'd endured. I remember the day Dave walked into our garage for his interview. It was the dead of winter, so cold our breath was fogging up inside. Frank and I were huddled around a little kerosene heater, trying to finish our very first paid job, a kitchen cabinet set for a neighbor. As I spoke, the noise of the party faded away, and I was right back there. The garage was freezing. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling cast long dancing shadows. I could smell the sharp tang of wood stain and the oily scent of the space heater struggling to keep the Minnesota winter at bay. I was 26 years old, wearing 3 layers of sweaters, my fingers so numb I could barely hold a pencil to check the numbers on our invoice. Frank was across the room, his face etched with concentration. He was running a piece of birchwood through a table saw, the blade screaming as it cut. He switched off the saw, and the sudden silence was deafening. He looked up at me, a smear of sawdust on his cheek, and he grinned. That grin could have melted a glacier. "You thinking about bailing on me, Ev?" he teased. "Running off with that fancy accounting degree to a warm office somewhere?" I smiled back, rubbing my hands together. "The thought has crossed my mind. Maybe somewhere in Florida. We'll get there," he said, his voice full of a certainty I desperately wanted to borrow. He walked over and picked up his hammer. It wasn't just a tool to him, it was an extension of his own hand. Every time I drive a nail with this thing, I'm not just building a cabinet, I'm building our house. I'm building a college fund for kids we don't even have yet. I'm building a life where you never have to be this cold again. He tapped the head of the hammer against his open palm. This is faith, Ev. Every single swing. That's when we heard a timid knock on the side door. It was Dave Jensen, a skinny kid barely out of high school, answering an ad we'd placed in the local paper, an ad we weren't even sure we could afford. He stood there, shifting from foot to foot, looking at our messy garage and our secondhand tools, and I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Frank saw it too. He walked right up to Dave, holding out his calloused hand. "Frank Vance," he said, "don't mind the mess. We're in the empire building phase." A warm tear slipped down my cheek, and I quickly wiped it away, bringing myself back to the party. The shop was quiet now, everyone listening. Dave didn't see a messy garage, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. He saw what Frank saw. He saw the promise. He stayed with us. Through the lean years when we paid him out of our own grocery money. Through the boom years when we could barely keep up with the orders. He has been the bedrock of this company. He's family. I motioned for Michael, who brought out a velvet-lined box. "So, Dave, we can't give you back the 40 years you gave us. But we can give you this." I opened the box. Inside was a solid gold replica of Frank's first framing hammer. It was beautiful, a piece of art, but it didn't have the soul of the original. Only Frank's hands could give it that. Dave's eyes welled up. He took the box with trembling hands, speechless. The entire workshop erupted in applause, the guys whistling and stomping their feet on the concrete floor. It was a perfect moment. A moment of shared history, of mutual respect, of a life's work being honored. One by one, Dave's workmates came up to hug him, to clap him on the back, sharing stories and laughing. It was everything Frank would have wanted. And as I stood there, soaking in the warmth and the love that filled that room, I felt a familiar presence slide up next to me. It was Ashley. She didn't say anything about the speech. She didn't comment on Dave's emotional reaction. She just surveyed the scene, the emotional blue-collar men, the potluck table, the simple, heartfelt celebration, and she let out a little sigh. It was a sigh filled with a kind of weary tolerance, the kind you'd give a child who'd just proudly showed you a messy finger painting. That's when she turned to Kevin, and the first crack in the foundation of that perfect night appeared. That sigh was the first tremor, the tiny crack in the foundation of the night. It was barely audible, but to me, it was as loud as a tree falling in a silent forest. And then she turned to my son, Kevin, and began to speak, not in the warm, relaxed tones of the party, but in the crisp, clipped cadence she used for her business calls. She was performing. "Can you believe this, Kev?" she said, gesturing vaguely at the crowd. "It's like a time capsule. So authentic." She said, authentic, the way you might describe a rusty farm tool at a flea market, a charming, useless relic. She pulled out her phone, the screen casting a cold blue light on her perfectly made-up face. The warm, amber glow of the workshop seemed to bend away from her. A few of the older guys, friends of Dave's, ambled over. "Ashley, right?" Kevin's wife, one of them said, extending a hand. That was some speech his mama gave, wasn't it? Ashley gave his hand a brief, two-fingered shake, as if she were afraid of catching a splinter. "Totally," she said, her eyes already back on her phone. "Super sentimental." She started tapping furiously on the screen. "I'm just live streaming a bit of the vibe here. My followers love this kind of retro Americana content. The engagement is insane." The men just stared, completely baffled. They were men who could build a house from a stack of lumber but had no idea what follower engagement was. "Kevin, my sweet lost Kevin jumped in to translate. Ash is a brand consultant," he explained, a little too loudly. "She works with companies to build their online presence. She's got, 50,000 followers now, honey. 52, actually," she corrected without looking up. "And it's not just about followers, it's about monetizing the vertical. We're creating a synergistic content ecosystem." It was like she was speaking a different language, a language designed to make simple things complicated and real things feel small. I watched as the men's friendly smiles tightened. They nodded, mumbled, "Well, good for you," and shuffled away, back to a world that made sense. They retreated from her world of clicks and clouds, back to the solid ground of oak and maple and steel. I wanted to walk over there, to take my son by the arm and lead him away from her cold, blue light. But I was the host. I was the matriarch. And Frank always said, "Never let them see you sweat, Ev." So, I just picked up an empty paper plate from a nearby table, my smile feeling as thin and brittle as the cheap paper itself. Ashley finally put her phone down, her performance for her invisible audience seemingly over. She turned her full attention on Kevin. She lowered her voice, but in the open space of the workshop, sound traveled. "Listen, I'm happy for Dave," she started, "but you have to see the bigger picture. This whole business model, it's a dinosaur. It's not scalable." "It's a good business, Ash," Kevin mumbled, looking down at his shoes. "Dad and Mom did well." "They did fine," she conceded, waving a dismissive hand. "They built a nice little life. But we can do more. What I'm building is a legacy. A real legacy, Kev. A digital brand. Something that actually scales, not..." She paused, looking around for the right word, a little smirk playing on her lips. "Not sawdust." Sawdust. The word hung in the air. All around us was the evidence of what she was mocking, the massive oak beams overhead that Frank and his crew had hoisted into place by hand. The intricate bar top where the drinks were being served, inlaid with a pattern so complex it had taken a master craftsman a month to complete. The very floor beneath our feet, solid, dependable, real. All of it, to her, was just sawdust. The messy byproduct of an obsolete hobby. I felt the blood drain from my face. I thought of Frank's hammer. I thought of his words from that freezing night in the garage. "I'm building a life. This is faith. Every single swing." What did this woman, who built nothing she could hold in her hands, know of faith? What did she know of legacy? Her legacy existed on a server somewhere, a fragile string of ones and zeros that could be wiped out in an instant. Our legacy was in the homes people raised their children in the tables they shared their Thanksgiving dinners at, in the heirloom pieces that would be passed down for generations. Kevin, to his credit, looked pained. "That's not fair," he said weakly. "They worked hard." "I'm not saying they didn't work hard," Ashley shot back, her voice like ice. "I'm saying they didn't work smart. Why spend 100 hours building one table you can sell for $5,000 when I can spend 5 hours creating a digital product I can sell for $50 to 10,000 people? It's just math. We're building an empire, you and I. And empires aren't built with your hands, they're built with your head." She tapped her temple with a perfectly manicured finger. She didn't see me standing there, just 10 feet away, by the drill press. Or maybe she did, and she just didn't care. To her, I was part of the scenery, the sentimental old woman in charge of the quaint little hobby. I felt a cold, hard knot form in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something else. It was a kind of clarity. The kind of clarity you get when a lightning strike illuminates the whole landscape for a split second, and you see everything exactly as it is. I saw my daughter-in-law not as a bubbly, ambitious young woman, but as a predator who saw our family's hard-won legacy as a brand to be leveraged, and its history as content to be monetized. I saw my son, trapped by his love for her and his shame for us, and I saw the path forward, suddenly laid out in front of me as clear as a blueprint. Frank was gone. He couldn't defend his legacy. That job, I realized with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, was now mine. It was a strange feeling. The warm, aching grief for Frank was still there, but now it was surrounded by something cold and hard, like a layer of ice forming over a deep lake. My job for the past year had been to mourn. My new job was to protect. The first rule of woodworking, the one Frank drilled into every new apprentice, is measure twice, cut once. It's a rule about patience, about precision, about knowing exactly what you're doing before you commit to an action you can't take back. I decided to apply it to my daughter-in-law. I put on my best hostess smile, the one I'd perfected over decades of company picnics and Christmas parties. I moved through the crowd, making sure everyone had a full plate and a cold drink, laughing at old stories and accepting condolences for Frank. On the outside, I was the gracious, slightly fragile widow, but on the inside, I was observing. I was measuring. My target had found a new audience. Her name was Cynthia Sterling, a well-known interior designer from the city, one of those women who look like they were born wearing expensive linen. Cynthia was ambitious, talented, and from what I'd heard, she was desperate to land a signature project that would put her on the national map. And Ashley had her cornered by the lumber racks, a glass of white wine in one hand and her phone in the other. Ashley was a shark who'd found a particularly tasty-looking fish. I made myself busy nearby, collecting empty bottles from a table, my movements slow and deliberate. It gave me the perfect vantage point. Ashley was showing Cynthia her Instagram feed. "You see, this is the power of narrative," she was saying, her voice dripping with the condescending authority of a self-appointed expert. "It's not enough to be a great designer, Cynthia. You have to be a brand. We need to curate your story, position you not just as a decorator but as a lifestyle visionary." Cynthia was eating it up. She was nodding eagerly, her eyes wide. "I've been trying to get more traction online," she admitted. "But it's a full-time job." "Of course it is," Ashley said smoothly. "That's where I come in. I handle the narrative so you can handle the blueprints." She took a delicate sip of her wine. "For example, what's the big project on your horizon? The dream job?" Cynthia's face lit up. "The Blackwood Terrace condominiums," she said, almost in a whisper. "It's the biggest luxury development this state has seen in 20 years. They're looking for a signature designer for the penthouses and the main lobby. Landing that, it would change everything for me." I had to stop myself from reacting. The Blackwood Terrace project. Of course, we had received the initial bid request 6 months ago. It was a monster of a contract, worth tens of millions. It would require a level of artistry and logistical planning that would stretch our company to its absolute limit. It was exactly the kind of challenge Frank would have lived for. The preliminary designs had been sitting on my desk for a week. The final decision on which design firm we would partner with was mine, and mine alone. Blackwood Terrace, Ashley repeated, tasting the name. She swirled the wine in her glass, feigning a thoughtful expression. "You know, I might be able to help with that." "What do you mean?" Cynthia asked, leaning in closer. "Well," Ashley said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The developers are exclusively using Vance Heritage for all the custom woodwork, right? It's the biggest contract in the company's history." A lie. We were one of 3 firms in the final running. "And this company," she said with a little laugh, "is family." I felt my knuckles turn white as I gripped a glass bottle. I methodically placed it into the recycling bin. The clink of glass on glass was sharp, but only I seemed to notice. "My mother-in-law is a sweet old lady," Ashley continued, "but she's not really involved in the big decisions anymore, not since my father-in-law passed. Bless her heart, this party is the most excitement she's had all year. The guys who really run the day-to-day, the ones who make the calls on these big partnerships, they're basically my uncles. I grew up with their kids." Another lie. She'd met Michael, my general manager, exactly twice. Both times she'd barely made eye contact. "Really?" Cynthia breathed, her eyes shining with ambition. "Don't worry about it," Ashley said, patting her arm. "You just get your proposal looking perfect. I'll make a few calls this week. I'll grease the wheels. We'll tell them your vision is the only one that truly complements the Vance legacy. Consider it handled." Consider it handled. There it was. The final measurement. The arrogance. The casual, cruel dismissal of me. The willingness to use our family's name, my husband's name, as a bargaining chip in her cheap little power games. I turned away from them, my face a mask of pleasant neutrality. I could feel their eyes on my back as I walked away, probably thinking I was heading off to refill the potato chip bowl. I walked through the heart of the workshop, past the massive table saws and the industrial sanders, my hand trailing along a stack of raw, unfinished walnut. The wood felt cool and solid under my fingers. It was real. It was honest. I walked until I reached the glass display case at the front of the office. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was Frank's first hammer. I stopped and placed my palm flat against the cool glass, right over the hammer. I didn't look at it with the soft focus of memory this time. I looked at it as a reminder of my purpose. Frank had built this company with faith. I would have to protect it with something else. I would protect it with strategy. Ashley thought she was a master of the game, but she had no idea she had just made a move on my board, in my house, and I was about to teach her how it's played. The cut was measured. Now, it was time to plan the joinery. Frank always said the best joinery isn't forced. You don't hammer a mortise and tenon together. You find the perfect fit, and they slide into place, creating a bond stronger than the wood itself. For that to happen, you have to be patient. You have to let the other piece reveal its own true shape, its own weaknesses. So, for 3 days after the party, I was patient. I waited. I went about my life. I woke up, made my coffee, and drove to the workshop in my 10-year-old Ford pickup, the one Frank had bought me because it had the best payload capacity for hauling lumber. I walked the floor, talked to the crew, and reviewed the numbers. Everything was exactly as it had always been, a comforting, steady rhythm of saws, whining, and sanders humming. But beneath the surface, there was a new current of awareness in me. I was watching. I was listening. I was waiting for the other piece to show its flaws. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Kevin stopped by my house on his way to work, a habit he'd kept since his father died. Usually, it was the best part of my day. That morning, he walked in with a glow of excitement I hadn't seen in him for a long time. It was the shallow, reflected glow of his wife's ambition. "Mom, you have to see this," he said, pulling out his phone as I poured him a cup of coffee. "Ashley posted it this morning. It's already got like 1,000 likes." He held the phone out to me. And there was my daughter-in-law. A public performance of a lie so brazen it almost took my breath away. She wasn't in her messy home office. She was in a rented studio space, one of those sterile, all-white rooms that scream, "I am a serious professional." She was wearing a crisp, white blazer, her hair was perfect, and she was sipping something green from a glass jar. Behind her, a single, artfully placed orchid sat on a minimalist desk. The scene was so meticulously curated, so utterly devoid of life or sawdust, it looked like a page from a catalog. "Hey, boss babes," she started, her voice a syrupy blend of fake intimacy and corporate jargon. "I wanted to hop on here this morning and share a major win, because I am all about celebrating our successes." She smiled, a flash of perfectly white teeth. "Some of you know that my family is in a very traditional legacy business." A photo of our rustic, timber-framed workshop flashed on the screen, framed like a quaint postcard from a bygone era. "And I am so proud of that history," she continued, placing a hand over her heart. "But I'm also passionate about bringing that legacy into the digital age." She leaned in closer to the camera. "So, this week, I've been working behind the scenes on a massive project for one of my amazing design clients. It's called the Blackwood Terrace Development, and it is a career-making contract." She took a dramatic pause. "And I am so thrilled to announce that after leveraging my family connections and showcasing my client's incredible vision, we have officially secured the partnership with Vance Heritage Woodworks." She clapped her hands together, a picture of manufactured delight. "It's a testament to the power of blending old-school integrity with new-school strategy. I am just so proud to be able to do this for my client and for my family." The video ended with a graphic flashing across the screen: number girl boss, number legacy, number making deals, number family business. I stared at the screen for a long moment after the video looped back to the beginning. My own workshop, my own family name, used as a prop in her fictional narrative. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the quiet focus that comes just before the storm. I slowly handed the phone back to my son. "Isn't it incredible?" He beamed, completely oblivious. "She's a genius at this stuff. She's getting our name out there, Mom, to a whole new audience." "Our name," I repeated quietly. I looked at my son, at his handsome, earnest face, and felt a pang of deep, profound sadness. How had he become so blind? How had he forgotten the lessons his father had taught him? A name isn't something you get out there. A name is something you earn, day by day, job by job, promise by promise. "And the Blackwood deal is finalized then?" I asked, my voice even. "Well, practically," he said, waving a hand. "Ash is just ironing out the final details. She said she's got it all under control. She has the inside track." "The inside track," I echoed. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the old oak tree in my front yard. Frank and I had planted it as a sapling the year Kevin was born. "Your father never believed in inside tracks, Kevin. He believed in doing the work. He believed a man's word and the quality of his craft were the only things that mattered." "I know, Mom, but things are different now," he said, a hint of frustration in his voice. "It's about networking. It's about who you know. Ashley understands that. She's playing the game." Oh, she's playing a game all right, I thought. She just doesn't know who her opponent is. I see, was all I said. I turned from the window and gave him a smile. Well, you tell her congratulations from me. After he left, I stood in the quiet of my kitchen for a long time. The smell of coffee hung in the air. The clock on the wall ticked its steady, relentless rhythm. I thought about Frank's hammer. I thought about the solid, satisfying thud it made when it hit a nail square on the head. One clean strike. No wasted motion. Honest. That was the Vance legacy. It wasn't a hashtag. It was the feeling of a tool in your hand, the integrity of a promise kept, the quiet pride of building something real. Ashley had taken that legacy and twisted it into a cheap, shiny lie for public consumption. She had used our name to build her own fraudulent empire of smoke and mirrors. The slow burn in my gut had finally reached its flashpoint. She had made her cut. Now, it was my turn. After Kevin left, I didn't waste another minute. I got into my truck and drove to the workshop. It was lunchtime, and the place was quiet, the big machine sleeping under a thin blanket of sawdust. But I didn't go to the workshop floor. Instead, I walked to a plain, unmarked steel door at the back of the main office, a door my own son probably thought led to a dusty storage closet. I pressed my thumb against a small dark panel next to the handle. There was a soft click, and the heavy door swung inward. I stepped inside, into a world Ashley and Kevin couldn't even imagine. There was no sawdust here. The air smelled of fresh coffee, old leather, and the clean, sharp scent of architectural paper. This was my real office, my command center. It was a space I had designed with Frank years ago, a secret passed down from the old-school moguls of the American Rust Belt. Keep the engine room loud and dirty, but make sure the bridge is quiet and has a clear view of everything. The room was a wide, semicircular space, with a floor-to-ceiling glass wall that curved around, offering a panoramic, God's-eye view of the entire workshop below. From here, I could see every station, every machine, every single moving part of the empire we had built. The walls were lined not with sentimental photos, but with framed architectural awards, patents for custom hardware Frank had designed, and complex-looking charts detailing supply chains and production schedules. My desk wasn't a cluttered wooden antique. It was a massive, minimalist slab of polished concrete and reclaimed steel, holding nothing but a sleek monitor, a phone, and in the very center, a simple, elegant glass case. Inside rested Frank's original hammer. It was the only thing in the room that was old, the quiet soul in the heart of the modern machine. I sat down in my leather chair, the seat sighing softly as it took my weight. For a moment, I just looked down at the workshop floor below. From up here, the men looked like figures in a meticulously designed diorama, each one playing their part in a complex, beautiful dance of creation. Ashley called it a hobby. From here, it looked like what it was, a $50 million a year operation. I took a deep breath, the anger and hurt from the morning solidifying into something cold and useful. Focus. I swiveled to my desk, my fingers flying across the keyboard, the muscle memory of 40 years in business taking over. I pulled up the master file for the Blackwood Terrace project. It was all there: geotechnical surveys, structural engineering reports, material sourcing lists from 3 continents, and a budget with so many zeros it looked like a phone number. This wasn't a game of hashtags and influence. This was a logistical and artistic challenge of the highest order. It was a cathedral of details, and one weak joint could compromise the entire structure. I opened the folder, containing the proposals from the 3 competing design firms. Cynthia Sterling's was the first one. I scanned through it. The designs were good, ambitious, clean, modern, but my eyes weren't on the drawings. I was looking at the section on consultants, and there it was, in black and white, Ashley Vance, Brand and Synergy Consultant. My daughter-in-law had already embedded herself into the official proposal like a termite. My intercom buzzed. It was Michael, my general manager, a man who had started as an apprentice the same year as Dave. "Evelyn, you in?" his voice crackled. "Come on up, Michael," I said. A moment later, he entered, holding a tablet. "Morning," he said, his face creased with its usual worried but capable expression. "Just wanted to let you know the preliminary numbers for the Blackwood material sourcing are in. The Brazilian walnut is running about 15% over estimate. We'll absorb it," I said without looking up from my screen. "The quality is worth it. Frank wouldn't have used anything else." That's what I figured, he nodded. Anything else? I looked up at him, my expression unreadable. Actually, yes, it's time to move on the Blackwood partnership. I want to schedule the final pitch meetings. Already? I thought you wanted another week to review. My review is complete, I said. Schedule all 3 firms for this Friday, an hour each. Back to back, starting at 9 a.m. You got it, he said, tapping the appointments into his tablet. I'll have my assistant send out the confirmations this afternoon. He paused at the door. Any frontrunners I should know about? I leaned back in my chair, my gaze drifting from Michael to the workshop floor below, then back to the file on my screen. I thought of Ashley, in her sterile white room, talking about synergy and leverage. I thought of her condescending smile as she called my life's work sawdust. Let's just say, I said, my voice perfectly level, that I have a feeling Friday is going to be a very educational day for everyone involved. Make sure Miss Sterling's firm and her entire consulting team is on the list. I want them here at 10 o'clock sharp. Michael just nodded, used to my occasional cryptic instructions. After he left, I swiveled my chair back to the window. Down below, the lunch break was ending. The low hum of the machines starting up again was a comforting sound. The work went on. The real work. Ashley had chosen the stage and written her own script, full of lies and unearned confidence. My only job now was to set the lighting. Friday morning it was perfect. A cool, crisp autumn sun streamed through the panoramic windows of my office, illuminating the faint motes of sawdust dancing in the air over the workshop floor. It was a beautiful day to tear something down to the studs. I was there at 7, as always. I drank my coffee, signed off on the weekly payroll, and watched the first design firm, a sharp young team from Chicago, come and go at 9. They were good. Their presentation was slick, their ideas were innovative. In another lifetime, on another day, they might have even gotten the job. But today wasn't about hiring a designer, it was about firing a charlatan. At precisely 9:58 a.m., I saw them pull into the guest parking lot. Cynthia Sterling's sleek, black German sedan looked wildly out of place next to the muddy pickup trucks of my crew. Ashley got out of the passenger side. She was wearing what I supposed was her version of a power suit, a cream-colored pantsuit so tight it looked shrink-wrapped, with heels high enough to be considered a safety violation on the shop floor. She looked confident, preening, giving Cynthia a reassuring pat on the arm as they walked toward the entrance. She thought she was walking into her own coronation. I buzzed Michael. "They're here," I said. "You know what to do." "Copy that," he replied. I watched on my monitor as Michael met them at the reception desk. He was polite, professional, the perfect picture of a man just doing his job. "Good morning, Miss Sterling, Miss Vance. We're ready for you. Right this way." Ashley gave him a familiar conspiratorial wink, as if they were co-conspirators. "Thanks, Mikey," she said, a nickname she had no right to use. I saw Michael's jaw tighten for a fraction of a second. He didn't lead them toward the small, glass-walled conference room we used for everyday meetings. Instead, he turned down a long, quiet hallway they had never seen before. It was a hallway I had designed specifically for this purpose, to intimidate. It was lined with large, framed photographs of our most prestigious work. There was the soaring, intricate library we built for a university back east. The minimalist, almost impossible-looking spiral staircase in a Silicon Valley billionaire's mansion. The meticulously restored woodwork of a historic national landmark in Washington, D.C. Each photo was a silent testament to the scale and artistry of our quaint little hobby. I saw Ashley's confident stride begin to slow. Her head was swiveling from side to side, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows knitting together in confusion. This wasn't the folksy, backslapping workshop she had described to her client. This was something else entirely. Cynthia was starting to look nervous, clutching her portfolio to her chest like a shield. At the end of the hall were two massive, 10-foot-tall doors made of solid, book-matched walnut. Michael pulled one of the heavy doors open and stood aside. "They're waiting for you inside," he said. Ashley peered into the darkness, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. She took a deep breath, puffed out her chest, and strode in as if she owned the place, Cynthia trailing nervously behind her. The lights came up slowly, revealing the boardroom. The room was my masterpiece of psychological warfare. The centerpiece was a single, colossal table made from a slab of reclaimed redwood, so polished you could see your reflection in it. It could seat 20. Around it were heavy, imposing leather chairs that made you feel small. The far wall was a single pane of glass, looking down onto the bustling workshop floor, a constant reminder of the real work that paid for this room. And at the head of the table, flanked by my head of design, my head of engineering, and my corporate counsel from the top law firm in the state, I sat waiting. The color drained from Ashley's face. It happened so fast it was like watching a switch being flipped. Her manufactured, number girl boss confidence evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed, horrified confusion. Her eyes darted around the room at the executives in their dark suits, at the scale of the table, at the view before finally landing on me. She looked at me as if she had never seen me before, and in a way she hadn't. She was seeing the CEO. She was seeing the woman her folksy, out-of-touch mother-in-law had been hiding inside all along. Cynthia Sterling just looked terrified, a guest who had accidentally wandered into the middle of a family war. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply gestured to the two empty chairs directly across the vast expanse of the table from me. "Good morning, ladies," I said, my voice calm and even, echoing slightly in the cavernous room. "Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." The silence as they made the long walk to their chairs was deafening. Every click of Ashley's heels on the polished concrete floor sounded like a hammer blow. They sat, placing their presentation materials on the table, where they looked flimsy and small. Ashley couldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the surface of the table, at the reflection of a woman she no longer recognized. Frank always said you could tell a lot about a person by how they handled a moment of silence. Ashley was crumbling in it. I let the silence stretch, letting the weight of the room press down on them. I folded my hands on the table in front of me. The trap was sprung, the ambush was complete, and my daughter-in-law had no idea that the worst was yet to come. "Well then," I said, my voice cutting through the tension, "shall we begin?" I didn't wait for an answer. Cynthia Sterling was already fumbling with the clasps on her leather portfolio, but I held up a hand, a small, simple gesture that stopped her cold. "Before we get to your presentation, Miss Sterling," I said, my voice cutting cleanly through the silence, "there are a few preliminary items I'd like to address." I nodded to my assistant who was sitting discreetly at a console along the wall. The giant screen behind me, which had been displaying our company logo, flickered to life. And there was Ashley, 10 feet tall. The video she had posted played in stunning, high-definition clarity. The sound of her chipper, self-congratulatory voice filled the cavernous boardroom, an obscene mismatch for the grave silence in the room. "Hey, boss babes. Wanted to share a major win." I didn't watch the screen. I watched my daughter-in-law. I watched as the blood rushed to her face, turning her cheeks a blotchy, panicked red. I watched her eyes widen in horror as she saw her smug performance projected for this audience of stone-faced executives. She seemed to physically shrink in her enormous leather chair, her tight, cream-colored blazer suddenly looking like a cheap costume. The video continued, each word a new shovel of dirt on her own grave. "Leveraging my family connections. We have officially secured the partnership." When the video ended and the hashtags faded, the screen went black, but her image seemed to hang in the air like a ghost. The silence that followed was heavier, more profound than before. It was a silence filled with her exposed lie. Cynthia Sterling was staring at Ashley, her expression a mask of dawning, horrified comprehension. I let the silence sit for a full 10 seconds. Then I spoke. "Miss Vance," I said, my voice quiet, forcing them to lean in to hear. "That was you, I believe." Ashley could only manage a choked, strangled nod. "I see," I continued, my eyes locked on hers. "In the video, you mentioned leveraging family connections. Could you please clarify for my legal counsel here which specific connections you were referring to?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked desperately at Cynthia, then at the impassive faces of my team, then finally at me. She was trapped. "And this secured partnership," I went on, my tone unchanged. "A binding contract of this magnitude requires signatures from the board, namely, mine. Could you please provide my team with the date those contracts were signed?" It was a verbal agreement," she stammered, the words tumbling out in a pathetic rush. "A formality. I was just trying to generate some positive buzz." "Buzz," I repeated the word, letting it hang in the air. "What you call buzz, Miss Vance, our legal department calls tortious interference, and fraudulent misrepresentation. You see, there is no verbal agreement. There was no inside track. There was only a lie, posted publicly, using my company's name. I leaned forward slightly, placing my hands flat on the cool, solid surface of the table. Allow me to formally introduce myself. I am Evelyn Vance. I am not a sweet old lady who putters around a hobby shop. I am the founder, co-creator, and since my husband's death, the sole proprietor and CEO of this $50 million corporation. Every major decision, every partnership, every contract, including the one for the Blackwood Terrace project, begins and ends right here, at this table, with me. Ashley looked as if I had physically struck her. The last of her bravado crumbled, leaving behind a terrified, cornered young woman who was completely out of her depth. I gestured toward the large glass wall overlooking the workshop. My husband and I built this company, this legacy you speak of so easily, with our hands. We built it on a foundation of skill, of sweat, and above all, of integrity. Our name means something in this industry because, for 40 years, we have done exactly what we said we would do. Our legacy isn't a hashtag, Ashley. It's the trust we have earned, one board at a time, one promise at a time. I paused, my gaze sweeping from Ashley's terrified face to Cynthia's pale, stricken one. And the first rule of protecting that legacy is that we do not, under any circumstances, do business with people we cannot trust. The finality in my voice was absolute. The unveiling was complete. The truth was now sitting on the table, as solid and undeniable as the slab of redwood we were all gathered around. All that was left was to bring the hammer down. I turned my attention to Cynthia Sterling. Her face was ashen, her professional composure completely shattered. She was looking at Ashley, but it was the look you'd give a venomous snake you'd just found sleeping in your bed. "Miss Sterling," I said, and my voice, though quiet, seemed to make her jump. "Your design portfolio is impressive. You have a clear talent." I let that small piece of praise land, a single, soft feather before the anvil. However, a project of this scale is not built on talent alone. It is built on a foundation of absolute trust. Trust between the client, the designer, and the craftsman. It is a three-legged stool. If one leg is rotten, the entire structure collapses. I paused, letting my gaze drift to my daughter-in-law, who was now staring at her hands, unable to look at anyone. "Your choice of consultant has demonstrated a profound lack of integrity. She has misrepresented her relationship with this company, she has made fraudulent claims in a public forum, and she has attempted to leverage a family connection that, in a business context, does not exist. She has proven herself to be untrustworthy, and by extension, she has made your entire proposal untrustworthy." I folded my hands and delivered the final blow. "We cannot, therefore, move forward with your bid. Vance Heritage is officially passing on the Sterling proposal for the Blackwood Terrace project. This meeting is adjourned." For a moment, there was absolute stunned silence. Then, Cynthia Sterling moved. She pushed her chair back so violently that it scraped loudly against the concrete floor. She stood up, her entire body trembling with a white-hot rage. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my team. She fixed her eyes on Ashley, and the fury that had been building in her finally exploded. "You!" she hissed, the word filled with venom. "You stupid, arrogant little girl. You did this." "Cynthia, I can explain," Ashley whimpered, her voice barely a whisper. "Explain what?" Cynthia's voice rose to a near shout, echoing in the vast, silent room. "Explain how you lied to me. Explain how you tanked the biggest opportunity of my entire life because you wanted to play dress-up as a brand strategist. I trusted you. I paid you. You told me you had an inside track." "I thought I did," Ashley cried, tears now streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "She's my mother-in-law." "She is the CEO!" Cynthia shrieked, jabbing a finger toward me. "She is the CEO of a $50 million company that you called a hobby. Did you think we wouldn't get caught? Did you think she was a fool?" The professional dam had broken, and now the raw, personal humiliation was flooding out. I remained perfectly still at the head of the table, a silent observer to the fallout I had engineered. This was not my fight. This was the natural, inevitable consequence of Ashley's own actions. A debt coming due. "You are a fraud, Ashley," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a low, trembling growl. "You have no connections. You have no power. You are nothing but a cheap knockoff. You are fired. And if my agency suffers any professional blowback from this, I will sue you for every penny you have and every penny you ever hope to have. Do you understand me?" Ashley just sobbed, a broken, gulping sound that was pitiful to hear. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. "Get your things," Cynthia commanded, already stuffing her architectural drawings back into her portfolio with shaking hands. "Get out of my sight." The walk from their chairs back to the boardroom door felt like a mile. Ashley stumbled as she rose, gathering her purse and phone, her movements clumsy and uncoordinated. She wouldn't look at me. She kept her head down, her hair falling around her face like a curtain. My team remained silent, their faces impassive. We just watched as they left. Two women who had walked in an hour ago as partners, now leaving as bitter enemies. Michael rose and quietly shut the heavy walnut doors behind them, but we could still hear them. Cynthia's furious, muffled voice echoed down the hall. "You have ruined me," followed by Ashley's broken, incoherent sobs. Then, silence. I sat there for a long moment, the adrenaline slowly draining out of me, leaving behind a profound weariness. I felt no joy, no triumphant thrill of victory, just the grim, quiet satisfaction of a necessary surgery completed. The cancer had been cut out. But the wound was deep, and the patient was my own family. My eyes went to the window, down to the workshop floor, where my employees were working, oblivious. They were measuring, cutting, building. They were earning their paychecks with honest, skilled labor. I had done this for them. I had done this for Frank's legacy. I had done it to protect the name that was etched over the front door. But as I sat there, in the quiet aftermath of the explosion, my thoughts were not on the business. My thoughts were on my son. He would be hearing from his wife soon, and then he would be coming to me. The business fallout was contained. The family fallout was just about to begin. I didn't have to wait long. At a little after 7 that evening, I heard a key in my front door. It was a sound I usually loved, the familiar scrape and click that meant my son was home. Tonight, it sounded like a bolt being thrown. Kevin didn't call out a greeting. I heard his heavy footsteps on the hardwood floors of the hallway, and then he was standing in the archway of my kitchen. His face was pale. His eyes were red-rimmed and filled with a hurt so deep it looked like a physical injury. He was holding his car keys in one hand, his knuckles white. "How could you?" he asked, his voice cracking. "How could you be so cruel?" I was standing at the counter, wiping it down with a damp cloth, a simple, mindless task to keep my hands busy. I didn't stop. I just kept moving the cloth in slow, steady circles. "Hello, Kevin," I said softly. "Did you have dinner?" "Don't do that," he snapped. "Don't act like it's just another Friday night. I just came from our apartment. She's a wreck. She's destroyed. Her career is over. Her biggest client is gone. All because of you. You humiliated her. You did it on purpose." I stopped wiping the counter and looked at him. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, and saw a stranger wearing his face, speaking a script his wife had written for him. "Tell me what she told you," I said, my voice even. "She told me you ambushed her," he said, his voice rising. "She said you set her up in some corporate boardroom with a bunch of lawyers to tear her down. Over what? A silly post on social media? Because you were mad about some joke she made at the party? My God, Mom, I know she can be a little much sometimes, but to do this, it was a public execution." He was breathing heavily, pacing back and forth in the small space between the island and the refrigerator. He was a caged animal, trapped in his wife's narrative of victimhood. I let him pace. I let him burn off the first hot layer of his anger. When he finally stopped, leaning against the doorframe, exhausted, I spoke again. "Is that what you think happened?" I asked. "That got my feelings hurt and decided to ruin your wife's life for sport?" "I don't know what to think," he shouted, throwing his keys onto the island where they landed with a loud clatter. "All I know is that my wife is in our bedroom, sobbing her heart out, and my mother is the one who put her there." I turned from him then and walked over to the small desk in the corner of the kitchen, the one where I still paid all my household bills by hand. I picked up a simple manila folder. It wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. The truth is rarely complicated. I walked back to the island and slid the folder across the smooth granite countertop toward him. It stopped right next to his keys. "This isn't about what I did to her, Kevin," I said, my voice low and steady. "This is about what she did to us. To your father. To his name." He looked at the folder with suspicion, then down at me. "What is this?" "It's the truth," I said. "Something you haven't heard all day. Go on. Open it." Hesitantly, he reached out and opened the folder. The first thing he saw was a high-quality color printout of Ashley's social media post. Underneath it, I had printed pages of the comments. "You're an inspiration, Ashley. Get it, girl. Number boss, babe. So amazing how you're helping the family business." I watched his face as he read. I saw the anger in his eyes begin to curdle into confusion. He flipped to the next page. It was a copy of the official proposal from Cynthia Sterling's firm, the one submitted for the Blackwood Terrace project. His finger traced the line item under the consultants section, where Ashley's name was listed, her title printed in crisp, professional font. "She told Cynthia she had the deal secured," I said quietly. "She told her I was just a sentimental old woman and that she had the real decision-makers in her pocket. She used our name to sell a lie, Kevin. She used your father's legacy as a cheap sales tactic." He didn't respond. He just stared at the page, the muscles in his jaw working. He looked like a man trying to solve a math problem in a language he didn't understand. Finally, he turned to the last item in the folder. It was just a simple 5x7 photograph. It was a picture of Frank, taken about 10 years ago, standing in the workshop. He was smiling, his face crinkled with laugh lines, a light dusting of sawdust in his hair. He was holding his first hammer in his hand, not posing with it, just holding it, the way a man holds a familiar and beloved tool. It was a picture of an honest man, proud of his honest work. That's what broke him. He sank onto one of the kitchen stools, his body seeming to deflate. He stared at the picture of his father, then back at the evidence of his wife's deception. The anger was gone, replaced by a wave of sickening realization. He finally saw it. He finally understood. He put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, my God." I walked around the island and stood beside him. I didn't touch him. This was a reckoning he had to face on his own. "Your father's legacy is in that folder, Kevin," I said, my voice softer now, filled with the ache I felt for him. Honesty, hard work, pride. He built this company, and our family, on those things. Now you tell me, who sabotaged whom? He didn't answer. He couldn't. He just sat there, under the warm lights of my kitchen, with the wreckage of his wife's lies and his own willful blindness spread out before him on the cold, hard stone. He didn't make a decision that night or the next day. A reckoning like that isn't a single event. It's a storm that has to pass through, and all you can do is wait for the skies to clear. He and Ashley separated a week later. He moved into a small, furnished apartment across town, and for months, the silence between us was a chasm I was afraid would never be bridged. I gave him his space. The hardest part of being a parent is knowing when to stop talking and just let your children find their own way back to the truth. 6 months passed. The seasons turned, the first snows of winter fell, and the work at the shop went on. Then one morning, I came into work to find a new, unfamiliar truck parked in the employee lot. A few hours later, I was walking the floor and saw him. Kevin was in the finishing shop, a place he hadn't set foot in since he was a kid. He wasn't wearing a suit or the trendy, expensive clothes Ashley used to pick out for him. He was wearing a simple pair of jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and a pair of brand new work boots that were already covered in a fine, pale dust. He had a sanding block in his hand, and he was hunched over a piece of maple, his brow furrowed in concentration. Next to him, showing him the proper technique, was Dave Jensen. Dave, who was supposed to be enjoying his retirement in Florida, but who had agreed to come in a few hours a week to keep his hands busy. I knew he was really there to help teach my son. Kevin was clumsy. His movements were stiff and uncertain. He was putting too much pressure on the wood, leaving little swirl marks that he would have to sand out all over again. But he was trying. He was there. He was covered in the very sawdust his wife had used as a punchline. I watched him for a long time from the doorway, my heart aching with a feeling so full and complex I couldn't put a name to it. Later that day, I found him in the break room, eating a sandwich his father would have loved, thick-cut turkey on rye. He looked up as I walked in, a little sheepish, like a teenager caught in the principal's office. "Mom," he said. "Kevin," I replied, my voice gentle. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him at the worn formica table. "How are your hands holding up?" He looked down at his palms. They were red and raw. "They hurt," he admitted with a small, tired smile. "Dave says I'll get used to it. He says Dad's hands were the same way when he started." He took a bite of his sandwich. "It's harder than it looks. This whole thing." He gestured with his head toward the workshop. "The patience you need, the focus. One wrong move, and you can ruin a piece that's taken a week to build." "That's the job," I said. "There are no shortcuts in here." "I'm learning that," he said quietly. We sat in a comfortable silence for a moment. "I spoke to Ashley yesterday," he finally said, not looking at me. "She's doing okay. She lost her apartment. She's living with her sister." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it. "Don't be," he said, shaking his head. "It's what she needed. She told me hitting rock bottom was the only way she could look up and see how fake everything she'd built was." He finally met my eyes. "She started a new business, a small one. She helps local shops set up their websites. No more brand synergy or lifestyle visionaries, just helping. She says it's the first time she's ever felt proud of her work." He looked away again. "We're in counseling. The therapist says it's a work in progress. I think that's what everything is." "I think you're right," I said. He finished his sandwich, his gaze drifting toward the main office. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything. Dad's hammer, the real one, the one in the case. Can I see it?" I nodded, and together we walked from the noisy break room to the quiet of the front office. I unlocked the glass case and carefully lifted out the hammer. It felt familiar in my hand, a perfectly balanced weight, a part of my own history. I held it out to him. Kevin took it with a reverence that touched me deeply. He wrapped his hand around the smooth, worn handle. His own hands were so different from his father's, softer, uncalloused, but for a moment, holding that hammer, he looked so much like him it made my breath catch in my throat. "It's heavier than I thought," he whispered, turning it over and over, studying the dents and scratches on the steel head, each one a mark from a job long finished, a story long told. "Your father used to say it had the weight of responsibility," I told him. "The weight of every promise he ever made to a client, the weight of our family's future." He stood there for a long time, just holding the hammer, the silence in the office filled with the ghosts of 40 years of hard work. He was finally feeling it. Not just hearing the stories, but feeling the physical, tangible weight of his own legacy. He carefully placed the hammer back in my hands. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't hide. I looked at my son, at the man he was becoming, and I knew the foundation was sound again. It had been cracked, nearly broken, but we were rebuilding it, not with lies and shortcuts, but with the slow, patient, honest work of sanding away the mistakes and starting fresh. I think he was finally starting to understand. Standing there in the front office, with the weight of his father's hammer in his hands, he wasn't just my son anymore. He was the next link in a chain forged in a cold garage 40 years ago. He was the future of a legacy built not on hashtags and influence, but on honesty, sweat, and the simple, profound integrity of a job well done. From my office window, I watch him now. He's not a master craftsman yet, not by a long shot. He still makes mistakes, but he shows up every day. He listens, he learns, he's earning his calluses, and when he walks the floor, he looks the other men in the eye, not as a boss, but as a fellow builder. He's found a respect for himself that was never going to come from a screen. He had to find it in the sawdust. My daughter-in-law learned her own hard lesson. She learned that a brand isn't a story you tell people, it's a promise you keep. Her new small business is thriving because for the first time, it's built on something real. Their marriage is still a work in progress, but it's being rebuilt on a new, more honest foundation. Sometimes, protecting a legacy means you have to be willing to tear things down to the studs. You have to be willing to make the hard cuts. My husband was the warm, beating heart of this company. His death forced me to become its steel spine. And I learned that true strength isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about the quiet, unshakable resolve to protect what truly matters. So, let me ask you, what are you building with the time you've been given? something that just looks good from a distance, or something solid, something true, that will stand long after you're gone. If this story resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding the strength to protect what you've built.